everybody. Welcome to Anatomical Gangster. I'm Sue Hitzmann, and today I am so excited for this new year. I have been interviewing so many incredible people, and today I had the opportunity to hang out with one of the most incredible educators in the fascial world is John F. Barnes. John is the founder of Myofascial Release Technique. He's been at this for well over 50 years and such a pioneer in the industry who's really moved the concept of myofascial release techniques into the forefront of manual therapy. He is an incredibly kind man, very intuitive, and our conversation spanned everything from what is myofascial release and what is fascial unwinding. And we talked about how myofascial release works to consistently and effectively create this expanded model of body function and the characteristics of the fascial system. We also talked about some of the common misconceptions about myofascial release or definitions like fascial unwinding to help understand those terms better. And also the role that patient education plays in the success of myofascial release and how he communicates with his clients. It's really an incredible conversation. And for the over 100,000 people John has educated in his practice, he really is one of the most well-known names in the myofascial release world. So controversial or not, I hope that you enjoy this conversation. If you're new to Anatomical Gangster, please subscribe below, share this with your friends. And if you think of somebody that I should be interviewing for this podcast, please leave that in the comment below as well. I hope you enjoy the conversation. And here is John Barnes. Well, it's such a pleasure to be talking to you, John. I'm so honored, and just thank you so much for being open to having a conversation and coming on Anatomical Gangster. I just really appreciate it.
Well, it's good to be with you too.
Yeah, really, really an honor. I'm just going to kind of jump in with this conversation, John, because, you have been on my radar, of course, my whole career of hands-on therapy. And, I know one of your gals that I was corresponding with about having the interview, she said, John doesn't really do interviews with people who haven't taken their course. And I was like, the fact that I never took a course with you is simply that I started out in the John Upledger world. And by the time I started learning about you, I was so far down this rabbit hole taking Jean-Pierre Barral's work in visceral manipulation, lymph drainage, the somato-emotional release. And it just never came to pass for me to take your courses. But of course, I do have your myofascial release, the healing ancient wounds on my shelf. And in front of me, I actually have one of your other, this masterpiece that you have for many years. And so I've got your books, and I actually am colleagues, Megan Ritchie, who's now Megan Pass. I don't know if that name rings a bell. Because you've trained so many people. And Tony Hansen is here in Naples, and I've taken, or I've had a bunch of sessions with him. He's a wonderful practitioner of your work.
Very nice.
Yeah. So I just, I've always been a fan of what you do, and I think this is such a timely conversation because I thought, the thing I'm finding on the internet is everybody's becoming a myofascial expert these days. Everybody's a guru and an expert of myofascia. And I was like, I wonder what John Barnes would say about all of this. So I thought, let's start a conversation with John Barnes, who to me is a pioneer of coining the term myofascial release. And maybe you can give us a little bit of a background. Let's maybe start this conversation with, how did you get into the world of the healing arts and hands-on therapy in the first place? Because you've been at it since the 60s and 70s. You've been at it for quite some time. So where's your origin, and why did this become the place where you've gotten yourself to?
Okay, well, I graduated as a physical therapist in 1960, the University of Pennsylvania. And I was pretty much a traditional PT about the first 10 or 15 years. And then I became injured. And I had been an athlete when I was younger, and I was involved in competitive weightlifting, competitive karate. I swam, I ran, I skied, I drove motorcycles. Basically, I love competition. I love motion.
Mm.
I went down to the gym one day to work out, and nobody was there to spot me, and I was squatting with somewhere over 300 pounds. And with nobody there to check me, I couldn't get up. So I'd
Mm.
been a gymnast when I was younger, and I thought I'll just do a back roll to get out of this, forgetting that when you have a 300-pound bar in your hands, they don't let go. So I crashed down with tremendous force, and I ruptured L5. I ripped a lot of the ligaments in that area.
Ay.
And I laid there totally stunned, and it was horrible. So I was numb from the waist down. Now, before I continue the story, this experience is something that I will come back to in more detail. Remind me to talk to you about our survival mechanism,
I will.
okay, and teach your memory. So I lay there numbed out, and in that instant, it took for me the things I love the most. As I said, competition, motion, and eventually the numbness started to wear off, and then the pain began.
Mm.
Horrible. I can laugh about it now, but I had to crawl out of the gym, and it took me quite a while for my legs to even be able to move. So from that point on, my life became quite a struggle. I was in my late teens at that point. And then I had become friendly with a radiologist, and he invited me to a ski house one day on a weekend. But I couldn't ski, and he could see how much pain I was in. So he suggested I get a spinal fusion. So
Mm.
I had that done, and that helped, but the pain was less intense. But I still hurt a lot and couldn't move well. I never forget the orthopedic surgeon coming in a day or two after the surgeon said, "Well, it was pretty successful, but don't ever extend or flex your spine again."
Well, doesn't that just drive you bananas, right?
He would have told me that before me, So,
My surgery is perfect. You'll never move right again, but
heck,
I'm really proud of what I've done. So good luck on the rest of it, right?
I killed him. So anyway, I have a failed surgery there, broken. It's like an old building that's broken down. So I tried every form of therapy known to mankind, and I was very frustrated because temporary results.
Mm.
Nobody wanted to get better more than I did. So out of total desperation, what I would do is lay on my living room floor, and I would push into the areas that hurt or kind of felt hard. I was still very strong, but I was trying to bull my way through. And when I was young, and I'm sure you and most of us, was very intuitive when I was young.
Mhm.
And I learned to trust it. But then you know how school beats it out of you. They want you,
Yes, kids do beat it out of you. My dad tried to beat it out of me, but
yeah.
yeah,
So they want us to be logical. They want us to be linear.
yeah.
And in fact, that's the anatomy we learned. And basically, the problem is we're neither logical nor linear. So we were given the wrong roadmap to reality. So my intuitive voice started to speak to me. I think that ripped it back open for me. So as I was pushing one day, I could hear the intuitive voice saying to me, "Lighten
Mm.
up some more." Then it started talking to me about spending more time. And I started to make this remarkable recovery. And then one day, I know you're familiar with unwinding. And one day, as
I
I was,
can't wait to talk about unwinding. That's definitely huge on my topic. We'll get there.
okay. So my body started to move spontaneously. And the next thing I knew, I was having an out of body experience where I was
Mm.
looking down on my body, arching, and I heard myself scream. And then I sort of collapsed on the floor. I was totally stunned. But I realized that something in that instant set significantly changed in my body. I was very different in all different levels from that moment on. And the funny thing is, after that, my patients all started to unwind. I had no clue what the hell it was, but I realized I could see such tremendous value, not only in myself, but everybody that I was treating. So it made a significant difference in reducing pain and restoring motion, which is what we're all about, right?
Mhm.
Anyway, um, that's how it kind of started.
Amazing. It's, because I've read, stuff about your background in your book, and I always think to myself, I have kind of such an affinity in a similar story. Like I was at the peak of my fitness career. I was doing boot camp and teaching gobs of classes. And then one day the bottom of my foot hurt me. And I thought I stepped on a piece of glass at first. And what started out as this foot pain, first diagnosis, plantar fasciitis, turned into this body-wide ache and fatigue. And when I went to doctors to try to find a solution, it was either it was in my head and I needed an antidepressant. I had one doctor say it might be lupus. They wanted to do more tests. And I just thought, they're missing something is wrong here. And I just kept thinking plantar fasciitis was the first diagnosis. And I thought inflamed fascia, like could inflamed fascia cause pain? And if that's the case, like, I don't know anything about that. There's no exercise for that. And it really veered me out of fitness and into the inquiry of what is fascia and how come I didn't learn about it in school really at all, except it being a kind of a passive packing material that gave everything cushion. And 30 years later, I'm like, well, that's really not a definition. But I have, in your book, I'm going to read one thing where you had actually said, that you were an inquisitive person, and you said it finally hit me that the health professions have ignored the importance of an entire physiological system, the fascial system, and you recognize the importance of research in physical therapy. And in your book, you even say you're strongly committed to supporting efforts that may prove the biomechanical and neurophysiological theory of myofascial release and develop scientific data as to the effectiveness of this valuable method. And certainly it is. So let's go through a couple of things, because I think that, I've been in the fascial community for a long time now. I'm a founding member of the Research Society and, always looking at research paper. But I feel like even in the 20 years that I've been kind of knee deep in it, we're still only at the beginning of understanding the true nature of fascia and all of its roles in well-being. So let's start with fascia. How would you define fascia today? What would you define it as?
Well, it reminded me that when I was in physical therapy school, we were just dissecting the cadavers. I'll never forget the day the anatomy professor yelled at us, "Clean that up, get that off of there," meaning the fact,
Right. Chuck it in the
on
bucket.
the floor.
Yeah,
This,
yeah,
it's,
get rid of it.
it's useless packing material.
Right.
So,
Let's get to the good stuff.
so it's basically a three-dimensional web with collagen, muscle, ground substance in it. Ground substance is what most people have completely ignored in healthcare. So the three-dimensional web is very important. And what happens from trauma is we get what's called crosslinks, and they start to shrink the fascia, like, twist it. But what also happens is the ground substance, which is the fluid of our body. Basically, fascia is the transport medium for the fluid of our body. It also is the medium through which the cells receive nutrition, energy, oxygen, and fluid. So the problem is a lot of nutritional theories out there are useless because it's paying no attention to the fact that if the fascia has solidified at the cellular level, it can't receive the oxygen. It can't receive the fluid or nutrition that we're ingesting. So basically, fascial restrictions, that area is dying. And it's pretty serious stuff, but nobody's paying attention to it. So it's kind of the missing link in all forms of healthcare. So the ground substance is key. And it's basically, though, beyond the ground substance, there's something, as you know, called energy. Now, healthcare doesn't like that word.
No, they don't like that word at all. And I always say, don't you use the word physics, because physics has energy. I mean, physics talks about energy, so it can't be nothing, right?
It's basic physics, but
It's
they don't,
basic.
they don't like the word mind either. So they
Right.
separate mind and energy from the body as if it's taboo. I think just because it creates too many variables for their way that they do research. The way research is being done basically on dead people.
Mhm.
People have no consciousness and no fluid. They're brittle. And that's what you and I learned, and everybody else learned. So Einstein, going back to basic physics, Einstein basically said everything's energy, different frequencies and vibrations of energy.
Mhm.
If we go even back further in time to another incredible genius, Nikola Tesla, it's light. We have light and we're communicating the way we are right now. He said the same damn thing. Everything's energy, everything's frequency. So that basically fascia is solidified energy that has basically slowed the vibration down. If I get hit in the face, that energy goes into my body.
Mhm.
If it goes through you, that's fine. But the problem is it gets lodged in the body.
Yeah, it never moves in a straight line. Most often we move and it bends, right? And then what are you going to do with that, right? What do you do with that force?
That's right.
Yeah.
So that changes the vibration. That vibration now starts to make that which should be fluid more and more viscous till eventually turns into crushing pressure, somewhere up to close to 2,000 pounds per square inch of pressure.
Mhm.
That crushing pressure that does not show up in any of the standard testing. Hardly anybody's looking for it.
Right.
The primary cause for most of the problems we have. So, we missed something huge, doesn't even cover what we missed. It's just beyond that. So it's the mind is key. Another word for mind is energy. We have an energy body. And the mind and the energy body, whatever you want to call it, consciousness, all the same thing. Different word. Maybe it's time we pay attention to it. I know
Yeah.
I know you are, and your method, melt, is wonderful, and it really just beautifully blends with MFR and vice versa.
Yeah, indeed. Indeed. I think that that's a big thing, even that word consciousness. I've interviewed so many people and I always ask them, what's consciousness? And I've gotten so many different answers. I think I'm more confused. And my friend Jaap van der Wal, I said to him the other day, I asked him a question and I've gotten a very long answer. And he's like, this isn't even the answer, Sue. But my question was my DNA equipped with consciousness? Like, was I formed in consciousness was like, because I'm going to be human, consciousness was already embedded in my DNA, or do I create consciousness? And my whole thought was like, if I'm producing my brain to organize the parts that I've already created so that I organize myself and can continue to grow, isn't that kind of a form of consciousness? And he was like, that's a really good question. So but it begs the question, fascia, we've been calling it a tissue because it connects everything, but I think that's the misnomer, is that we think of it as some sort of a like parts, when it's a continuous network that allows frequency, vibration, flow to move through the system. And so sometimes what I call it is stuck stress, is like, it's like sediment in a river where the fluids are always in a constant state of motion, but it's kind of like around our joints where the nervous system really needs to keep inherent communication to move us. That's where those pockets of sediment arise, and that decreases neural frequency. And then we have compensation even before dysfunction, right? Our bodies are designed to compensate, to move us, and we don't even know that that's happening. And maybe that's the big thing, is that sometimes our body is giving us signals. I call them pre-pain signals. Their body's like giving us messages all the time, like, yoo-hoo, come on in here and help me out. And we aren't listening. We ignore it. We pop pills. I make the analogy of, it's kind of like your fire alarm going off because your toaster's on fire. And most of us go over to the fire alarm and take the batteries out rather than fixing the fire in the toaster. And that to me is the problem, is we're in this very symptom solution driving world of sick care, not health care. And so I think some of this might seem, elusive to people, because fascia is this continuous system. And maybe in the fascial world, we're even getting further away from a very specific definition, which I think is good because fascia has so many roles. But I think that's the problem that we're having in the scientific community right now, is that there are these terms, these definitions that are too vague, and then people are now using those definitions, but they're talking about something else entirely. So one of the definitions that you've, and I'm actually gonna go back to your book, and I'm gonna give you your definition to you. This, in your book, you say myofascial release is the three-dimensional application of sustained pressure and movement into the fascial system in order to eliminate fascial restrictions and facilitate the emergence of emotional patterns and belief systems that are no longer relevant or they are impeding progress. What a great statement that is, but is that a definition? So let's talk about myofascial release. How do you define it as a, like, just give me a simple definition of what is it to release fascia or myofascia? Maybe what is myofascia? Okay, for everybody listening, fascia and muscle, it's the connection between the two. But what is it to release fascia?
Kind of hard to define. It's I look at the fascial system as a intermediary, and as it's released, so many other things happen physiologically, structurally, emotionally, and that. Let's go back to conception for a real quick moment.
Mhm.
I don't know if you've seen them recently. There's been a number of beautiful videos of the moment of conception when sperm enters the egg and it's
The spark.
like
Yeah.
of light.
Yeah, amazing.
See, that's consciousness. We are light. We're love and light, basically, and that's the energy that flows through the fascial system. So that as that we come in with some type of a pattern that's unique to every one of us. You've heard of the story of an acorn that possesses the pattern for the full-grown oak. So that's what we come in with late, and then we have this pattern within us. So one of the many things that happens from fascial restrictions to traumas of our life, physical or emotional, is it disturbs that pattern. And like you said, there's a flow to this whole situation. And like the example you gave, think of yourself as this beautiful flowing river. But now the fascial restrictions are equivalent of a dam. And it's slowly tightening, tightening, tightening. That's creating friction, which is heat, suffering, pain, because the water's ramming against this energy it's our life force, basically. So that as we finally release the area, when a dam breaks open, it's not like a floodgate that just opens. It's chaos. It's sticks and stones and roar, noise, and all sorts of stuff happening. That's where you and I, as a therapist, have to be there to help them get through the chaotic period, because we have to go through chaos to make a change. It's basically based on what's called systems theory or chaos theory, and both basically. And basically, it says that no meaningful change can occur at any level without going into a period of chaos. It's when the possibility occurs to change.
Mhm.
So as that chaos, the beautiful thing is we always reorganize at a higher level. So there's this sine wave effect to things. When people don't get better straight away. It's all over the place. You're back and forth for a while because the negative patterns that have been established from the various restrictions, physical, emotional, or mental, are very strong.
Mhm.
It's hard to disturb them. That's why repetition with what you do and what I do is really important to help break up the physical restrictions, the emotional, the mental. I mean, you and I were taught a lot of bull BS in school, and I learned I don't want to get into that. Anyway, so where are we going with this?
Myofascial release, I mean, like to release fascia. I think what I'm hearing from you, and just tell me if I have this right, because I feel like this would be your answer, is that you're not just talking about like, okay, my fascia has wound itself up in my arm and I'm unwinding the tissue. You're actually talking about neuroelectrochemical, emotional, physiological releasing is to allow for the energy field within fascia to move.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, which is different. And here's why I say this. I hope everybody's hearing, like, this is where confusion starts to happen, John, is because there is a lot of people out there who really believe that they are taking a tissue that is wound up and unwinding it. And I know you know Carol Davis, who is just a phenomenal educator in our field. And a number of months ago, I had the opportunity to do we had a conversation about this term. That here's another one. So we've got myofascia or myofascial release as a understanding that a little bit better from how we've just described it, but also the words fascial unwinding. Okay, so now here's another one for you, right? Because when we were asked to talk about this, Carol and I both agreed. I said, it really depends upon how you define fascia. Are you defining it as unwinding a tissue, unwinding an organ, which now takes neuroelectrochemical frequency, or are you talking about it as a system of connection, a system of frequency vibration through the body? And Carol and I are both under the understanding of fascia as a system, as which I think you also define fascia more of a system than just a collagenous tissue that connects stuff. There's more to it. So we got into this conversation with another gal who does somatic movement, and somehow or other, what we were talking about, this other woman is now saying her technique is fascial unwinding. And I said, with all due respect, that's not how I learned what fascial unwinding is. It actually, as a practitioner, I don't even initiate fascial unwinding. I'm not trying to unwind anything, but oftentimes, and I'll just give an example, I was working on somebody just the other day and just doing a held traction in his spine where it was just not moving. So what I've learned is if you put something to its end range and you just sit there and wait, and you just notice what you feel, and then there's just a moment in time where it's almost like an internal, like something is happening in that tissue. And then I stop my tissue tension and just wait. And about 4 seconds later, he arches himself back and tenses up his whole body, takes a big breath, and then relaxes down. And I go, okay. And then I start moving on. And he says, what was that? And I said, sometimes they would call that a spontaneous motion, which sometimes is called fascial unwinding. I don't know if it's just he's like, so my fascia unwound? And I was like, well, the neuroelectrochemical changes elicited a movement because fascia relates to your nervous system and how you move. And sometimes we ourselves can release unnecessary tension or tension compression mismanagement in the system with these spontaneous adaptations. So that's how I've learned fascial unwinding. I, as a practitioner, am not unwinding something, nor is I'm not even initiating. I was taught palpate, don't manipulate, feel and follow, don't initiate. Let the body, let them do it, and you just follow it. So that's my understanding of fascial unwinding. So you're the expert in this. You're somebody who has used this word unwinding, and I think in many ways you're one of the pioneers of this concept getting out there to other practitioners and why people use it as a term. So how do you define unwinding? What is it that unwinds and how does it occur? Or what's your understanding of it?
It's a matter of letting go. Like you're saying, not fixing it. It's all of healthcare basically has a fix-it mentality. And the person that you mentioned, what she's talking about, is coming from basically the conscious mind. Let's just, for a moment, we have to get past the brain. Consciousness in every cell of your body and beyond your body.
Mm-hmm.
So that we come back to that, it's when between you and your patient, it has to be trust. The patient has to feel good in your hands and feel your confidence, your expertise, without you forcing yourself upon them. You're with them. And this is some deep connection that occurs, which you're describing happen with you. As you open up the fascial system, the energy we call our mind or consciousness is starting to flow, and the person starts to spontaneously move. Other people that are doing what they're calling unwinding or MFR, first of all, most people are doing structural myofascial release. It's too damn quick. It's releasing the elastic and muscular component. That's 20% of the system. But they're missing 80% of the system, which is the collagenous barrier, And what we're talking about is the ground substance in consciousness. It's massive. So they have to spend more time like you did. You have to be with them and wait for them to finally take the brakes off, basically.
Yeah.
People are walking around with the brakes on. So it comes from the subconscious, which everybody's missing. Everybody's doing things as people instead of being with them. And so the practitioner has to be centered also. When we get it, that's a whole other thing we get into in our seminars, but we have to cut down the conscious mind. Let me back up to add into this. This is a very simplistic way of looking at consciousness, but I think very practical for us. Our whole education is based on intellect. It's what I call channel 5, our rational side. The problem is that no healing occurs on the intellectual rational side or channel 5 side. And that's where every form of therapy is based upon.
Mhm.
So that with myofascial release, when you learn as the therapist to quiet yourself and the patient trusts you, somehow we switch into what I call channel 3, which is our intuitive, instinctive side. That is the healing zone.
Yeah.
That's when somebody lets go, they start to spontaneously move or cry, because they go back in time to resolve old emotions and memories and traumas that have been buried in our bodies for a long period of time
Hmm.
for most of us, So channel 3 is basically, the neuroscientists have recently discovered that the database in channel 3 is in excess of 10 million to 1 of that of our intellect, channel 5. In fact, it's more than that. It's so vast that they gave up. Another word for all of that is wisdom. So we were taught in school a very linear logical approach. As I said, the body's neither linear nor logical. And we've been functioning with this minuscule level of consciousness. Now, there's nothing wrong with channel 5. It's wonderful, and I highly respect it. But it's a tool.
Mhm.
It's a servo mechanism. We let the tool run the show. I don't mean this to be critical in that way, but the difference between channel 3 and channel 5 is the level of a moron. If we let the moron run our show. And channel 5 is all an accumulation of other things we're programmed. And it's not until you really have myofascial release that you realize how heavily programmed we've all been. Our education wasn't true education. It was mass hypnosis.
Yeah.
No. So
Yeah. Do as you're told. Just listen and take the test.
yeah,
Don't worry if it's going to benefit you in the future. Just pass the test, right?
that's it. That's it. Never forget about it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So basically, we don't realize that we basically are a basically accumulation of other people's thoughts. We were told what to think and never to feel, of course. Healing is feeling.
Yeah.
So we miss something so incredibly important.
Yeah. Well, and you also said it, that, and this is something that maybe you can also explain here, with your particular technique, you're a long held sustained tension through the system. A lot of your techniques are sometimes sitting there for 3, 4, even 5 minutes, just finding subtle tension, meeting the person, and then finding that place where whatever it is you're sensing, you're just holding on to. And I always say I get very Southern when I talk to people with melt. I say, you've got to slow down, people. I know everybody's in a hurry to get everything fixed today, but we got to slow down. And if anybody is into that slow, methodical methodology, and I think maybe you're sort of saying that, is that if you're doing things more quickly or acutely, you're really just getting into the 20% of tissue and blood flow. You're releasing blood flow to muscle, right? Myofascial blood flow to muscle. Okay. But if you're holding long periods of tension through a mechanical force that you're applying, that there are other things that are going on in the matrix because of this neuroelectrochemical superconducting highway that the fascial system produces, right? So what is that other 80% of what do I want to call it? The transformation that's really occurring from your work with the slow holds. Why do you think that these techniques work better to unwind or release the system of fascia by doing slow holds rather than heavy compression in short periods of time?
Well, the other forms of therapy, as I said, are too quick, and that we use that too. I mean, there are times when you have a very old, thick restriction, you need to get your elbow into it. You need to do J stroking or whatever, you know. That's very valuable. But that's breaking up the crosslinks on a mechanical level. But as you're saying, there's so much more to happen, but it takes time. Everybody's in such a rush. I mean, if 5 minutes can change somebody's life, isn't that the hell worth slowing the hell down?
Yeah, I guess people just need to feel it though. Like if the therapist isn't doing something that's like causing somebody pain, they're thinking it's not valuable. Or like I've worked on somebody's knee, but they've got such a spin all the way up to their opposite shoulder. I'm causing tension up in their upper back, and they're like, Sue, I don't know if you heard me, but I said it's my knee, not my shoulder. And I'm like, yeah, I get it. But that's part of the the fascination to me is like when those things really started to work for me with clients and I was making bigger changes, it kind of dismantled a lot of the education that I had previously to it, where more like physical therapy, if you've got a knee problem, you work on the knee. You got a shoulder problem, you work on the shoulder. But somehow or other, that never made any sense. And that's why I think the fascial system makes more of an explanation of the it's all connected kind of mentality, right?
Exactly, exactly. Yeah, I keep saying find the pain, look elsewhere for the cause. All of education of any healthcare professional is based on symptoms, like the shoulder problem or whatever,
Right.
or just the shoulder. That's just the starting point, you know. So that's how we learn to read the body. So as we're treating somebody in a particular, so we'll start with symptoms. That's important. But then you start to read the body and you see bodies that are fasciculating, or it gets red or it gets hot, like a vasomotor response. You analyze tissue texture. Is it hot, hard, or tender? And all
Right.
of a sudden, and it can be far, and usually it's far, far away from the symptom they came in to see you for. So you start with symptoms, but then you start to go with the body, and you listen to it's wisdom. The body is communicating in your own particular language. It's not words, it's not thoughts, it's not force. That's one of the things we have to watch with our patient. Whenever you're treating somebody, if you notice they're tightening up, obviously you drive an elbow down somebody's back, they're going to tighten up. As I said,
Sure.
you do need to do that. However, anytime that they have to tighten up or they start to think or they start to talk, there's no therapeutic value. And that describes most therapeutic sessions. It's very sad. So as we start to learn to quiet down, learn to teach them to quiet down, give them permission to feel. We've been told not to feel whether we realize it in our society or not. So we have to be able to feel what's going on. And that takes you into basically what you could call, what I call therapeutic pain. If you go to my website, myofascialrelease.com, look up the article section. You might want to read that article, not you, but the other people, called Therapeutic Pain.
Called, what is it called, John?
Therapeutic pain.
Therapeutic
So
pain.
we basically have looked at pain in the past as acute or chronic pain, but there's
Hmm.
another level of it. And so that when you wait gently with the tissue, when you engage it and don't force it and wait, basically the old memories come up. Now, this brings us into another concept that I have had to do with the mind, in that we have a survival mechanism. Every human and every animal has a survival mechanism. But healthcare, of course, ignored it because it had to do with the mind. So when something is overwhelming to us, too painful, too scary, somehow our energy leaves our body to numb us out.
Yeah.
That's what happened to me with the weightlifting accident when I fell and I was numb for a while. I didn't have words for it back then. So when we numb ourselves out, we can get through the ordeal. In fact, it saves our life. Pretty important stuff. But the problem is it's a fragment experience. Nature wants us to learn. We learn through feeling. So when we block the feeling, this is not done on the conscious level. When the energy leaves the body to numb us out, it's basically a fragmented experience. One of the ways that I describe it, it goes back to unwinding. It's as if the pain of the moment, the fear, whatever was occurring at that moment of injury is no longer available to the conscious mind. So that's the problem with psychotherapy. It's all Channel 5 talk.
Mhm.
So as that information comes back into you, you, the therapist, are there to facilitate. Let them know it's okay to feel that. The more you feel it, the deeper the release will be for you. And you can pace it, you can stop it and interrupt it anytime you want. But think if you had a moving film and then you had trauma and it was the equivalent of cutting pieces of the film out. It's not available to your conscious mind. So what's happening is, let's say you're hit by a car. This brings us to another piece of the unwinding that we need to pay attention to. You're walking across the street and you become aware of cars coming at you. You turn to face the car and you brace against the car. At that moment, some of you leave, the fear just drives you out of your body. And you get hit. There's another, but think about that. You're in a position in space. You fell to the ground, then the car rolled over you. There's a big one. And that's locked in your body. So your subconscious is there to protect you. It's magnificent what it does for you. It loves you.
Yes. Yes.
So that somehow, like it's like a hologram. It's embedded in the tissue and the fluid substance. So that it's like I don't know, it's hard to put into words, but basically your whole body now is interpreting it. Just the car's still hitting you day and night. You can't consciously control it. Drugs blot you out so you don't feel it, but it doesn't help you to heal. Temporary result at best, and of course, a lot of complications. Excuse me. So as these memories come up, you, the therapist, are there to say it's okay to feel this. If you were attacked, surgery, falls, being hit by a car, whatever it is,
Mhm.
wasn't fully felt at the moment. And there's good reason for that, but it's only meant to last a day or two.
Right.
But it's there all day
Yeah,
long.
20, 25 years later.
Well,
I mean, it
well,
can last a
well,
lifetime, right?
yeah, so it's only till finally your body experiences this, that the subconscious interprets that it's over, you're safe now, and now you
Mm,
can finally soften, and now healing can commence
yeah.
authentic.
Yeah, that's really important. What John is also talking about for you guys listening here. The thing I know about the brain from working on a lot of people is that your brain really doesn't know the difference between the past, present, or future. It really doesn't. So that's why people can have PTSD, is that they hear a sound and their body instantly goes into the past and thinks it's happening right now in the present moment. So as a practitioner, we call them somato-emotional releases from how I would define it, right? That I am working on a client and then suddenly they're talking about an experience that they had that happened when they were young. And in that time of talking about it, as I'm feeling their body tense back up, having the conversation about it, and then reminding them this was in the past and this might be some of the energy that you're still here. Why don't you tell your stomach that it can just, all those cells can just go back to being stomach cells and they don't need to protect you from your mom anymore because your mom has long since left the planet and she can't hurt you anymore, right? And suddenly it's like an epiphany in some part of the subconscious where it's as if it's being seen for the very first time, even though this is something that happened so many years ago. And this is such a powerful experience. This was also, again, what happened to me when I was debilitated. I mean, I'm 28 years old, crawling myself to the bathroom for months and nothing worked. And my experience was that I went to a cranial sacral therapist, Barbara Chang, and she worked on my nose. And in the middle of it, I went, oh, and she said, what was that? And I said, wow, I just had a memory that popped up in my head. And it was of having a softball thrown at my face at high velocity just before a game by my coach, just before a big game. And he threw it right at me for whatever reason. I wasn't ready. And I remember that moment of gasping and that ball smashing me in the face and knocking me out. And the next thing I remember is my dad coming over me, sticking his cigarette back in his mouth and reaching down and pushing my nose back into place and going, don't worry, it'll build character. And that whole moment came back to me. And that was like when I was, maybe 14 years old, right? And all of a sudden that came up and she said, it feels to me like that energy has you uprooted. It's as if it uprooted you. And what I can tell you is that when my foot first started to hurt me, it was almost exactly a year before the day my father died. And so I think that the reason my foot hurt me wasn't from I hadn't done anything out of the ordinary. I had been doing the same routine forever. But suddenly my foot was so painful I couldn't stand on it. And I really have that image of being like a flower uprooted from the earth. And I was just left dangling. And while he hadn't died yet, almost as if my field, my energy field, felt him departing. And then he died a year later. And it like was so crushing to have your parent die when you're 28 years old. And that I think that really taught me a lot about how frequency works, how vibration works, how flow works, and when you're not in flow, how that can completely stunt everything. So I think that these are powerful concepts that might be very elusive to people because they do seem vague and like, where is the science? And, how can you measure it, right? It's like, how do you measure? You can't measure consciousness. How do you measure somato-emotional releases and old memories that suddenly pop up and can be resolved in the future? Like, how do you do that, right?
Well, yeah, it's a beautiful example. So that from those type of traumas you had, there's a sense of contraction that goes into that from the grief and the sorrow of the whole experience or the pain or whatever happened to you. That tightness then pull like a web and eventually create into physical manifestation in your foot and start to cause horrible pain for you, you know? So the person that says to you, how do we measure it? Say you don't have to. Research is only to prove something you're trying to prove. With what you do and what I do, the results are right in front of you. You don't need research. Research
Right.
will never prove anything about the fascial system that's meaningful because all research is done with a reductionist mindset. Reductionism, the way of looking at the body, it breaks things into pieces, it cuts people, it figures it out, puts
Mhm.
labels on it as if for separate pieces. Back in 1923, reduction was proven to be a totally erroneous view of looking at the human being by Max Planck, the father of quantum physics. 1923, and here we are now, almost
Yeah.
100 years later, still don't get it. You know,
Yeah.
people don't need it. It satisfies people. You only understand what you do and what I do from the experience of it. But everybody poo-poos the experience. That's based on fallacious material and understanding of basically reality. The results are right in front of you.
Yeah, the shit works. I mean, what are you going to say except that? It's like, look, people feel better. And they're like, but what's the scientific evidence or what's the fundamental basis? I'm like, that they felt like crap and now they feel better and they're living their lives. What more do I need? Where's where is the confusion here? But I think that's the problem is that, the collegiate world proceeds one funeral at a time. Science and research proceeds one funeral at a time. It's just a slow process. And I think, although now with all of the new technology, all of the AI that's out there, I just sort of feel like maybe with new technology that maybe I would wonder, do you think that myofascial release will evolve in the next decade with all the fascial research that's kind of now emerging with new technology? Do you think that there will be more answers for it?
I kind of doubt it. Um, I've trained over 100,000 people, way over. We stopped counting after a while. My success has not come from any research or any physician. It's come from experience and people spreading the word. And it's going to grow exponentially. It is growing exponentially right now, as you know.
Mm.
Research is fine, but again, the way research is done, it's reductionism. This is not. It can't be. A global system can't be studied from that perspective. Basically,
Mm.
your example was really a good example of tissue memory. I had a very similar situation too. That I was treating a young man that was sent to me. He was like in his 40s, and he had horrible eye pain, sinus problems, horrible headaches for most of his life, neck pain. So one day, I was treating him, and he started to unwind. He was sitting up, and his head snapped back, and he screamed. And all of a sudden, his eyes started to swell and become purple. And at that moment, like yourself, he had this memory of when he was 6 or 7 being hit in the eye with a high velocity baseball.
Mm.
His eyes stayed purple for a couple days. His sinuses started to drain. His headache went away, and it's all better. So
Yeah, I mean, I woke
Yeah.
up the next day and my foot didn't hurt me, and I thought, "Oh, that's placebo. That's
Yeah.
placebo. That's not real." And yeah, days later, I'm still like, what was
The
that
hell-
you did?"
How the hell are you going to research that? You
Yeah.
don't keep yourself to anybody. The patient don't care. Researchers, that's where they make their money. That's fine, but it's not going to happen.
Yeah, well, and you've just said it. You've trained over 100,000 people
Way
in
over.
wow. I mean, I'm so proud of myself that, in 20 years, I've got about 3,800 instructors worldwide, and I find that notable, for myself. I feel very proud that anybody has listened to one word that I've said, and that this light touch therapeutic technique, which is so gentle and has so much to do with breath and just, becoming aware, attuning your awareness to what you feel, gentle compression, gentle tension with a focused intent and slower. And people are like, that's not sexy. I'm like, what's not sexy is complaining about pain. That is not sexy at all. There's no sexiness in being the person who is constantly suffering and constantly complaining of pain. That's not sexy. What is sexy is when you get up and you feel great and you move around and you're happy and joyful and abundant and you love living and the human experience seems grand. That sounds sexy to me. So, I'm sorry that it's not flashy and, we're not wearing, sexy aerobic clothes or whatever to teach you, but this is practical and it makes sense to me. And so I just keep at it, whether people agree. And, I mean, we all get controversy, like, where's your evidence? And I'm like, my evidence is in the many hundreds of thousands of people that have found benefit with it. I don't know how much more validation I need than that. But we always try to do science. I mean, we do have science papers on it. We do have a research paper for it, but it's still gives a crap? You know what I mean? It doesn't really make any sense. So I'm questioning this. So how do you envision the integration of myofascial release, like with other therapeutic modalities? If somebody's listening to this, and let's say that they're a massage therapist, or maybe they're new, they're out of college and they've gotten, like I did, a very useless degree in exercise science, which yielded nothing for me in education. Actually, I argued so often I almost got kicked out of school. So, what would you say to somebody who is maybe thinking about going down this road to learn myofascial release, and maybe they're not sure, like maybe they want to be a physical therapist or a massage therapist? What would you tell them to help guide them into something that would give them a successful career in hands-on therapy?
Well, I recommend that you become a massage therapist. Physical therapy, I hate to say, is really going awry, and it costs you over $100,000 now to become a PT. And
Yeah, and then just learn how to code for insurance. What a useless waste of time that is.
yeah, so massage therapy is a more direct route, and thought I would never say this, but a lot of massage therapy is based on erroneous ideas too. Massage feels great, but it doesn't last long enough with the barriers. So you have temporary result also. I'm not saying we do massage. I highly recommend massage and other forms of therapy. I'm not saying the only thing you should do is myofascial release, but as you start to see the results with what you do and what I do, maybe other forms of therapy are going to be there, but most of it should be basically MFR. And I never intentionally unwind anybody. It just happens because the process of myofascial release generates trust, confidence in your touch. Do you want to get your license to touch? We do have a healing seminar where a lot of patients, people with no background at all, can come to it. A lot of people that come there then basically get inspired and want to become a therapist and get their license to touch. That's the best route to go usually. Um, the PTOT, unfortunately, is looked again still just fixated on symptoms, fixed mentality, very linear, very logical. And I'm linear and logical, but there's another part of us, all of us, the creative side that gets criticized. But
Of course.
you have to give up your concern about what other people think about you. You should be very proud of yourself, what you've done. I've heard nothing but great things about you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, I mean, it really, I think, in my 30s, I worried a whole bunch about what people thought about what I was doing. In my 40s, I kind of felt like I needed to really be quiet and stay under the radar. And now that I'm in my 50s, I just don't give a shit what anybody says. At this point, I'm so curious about so many things. And I feel like I'm only just at the beginning of what it is. I'm curious about learning and always learning. I mean, I feel like it's a constant state for me all of the time to think a little out of the box. And if it's controversial, that's why my podcast is called Anatomical Gangster, is because most of the people I talk about are controversial, but effective. And I think that that should be encouraging for anybody to realize that if you're going to walk a walk, own it and do it and just keep doing it. And if you're believing in it and if it works and it's effective, then I would say stay on that right track no matter what you're doing or what anybody says, right? I mean, what are we doing waiting for somebody else to validate us? We might as well just forget what life is about at that matter. Well, my last question to you is the question that I ask everybody that comes on Anatomical Gangster. So I'm going to pose this to you and see what your answer is as well. Is if you could tell somebody something that you know that most people don't know anything about, but if they learned about it, or they knew about it, it might change the course of their very life. What would it be? What's the something you've learned in your lifetime that you think people should know?
Well, what I've seen with over 50, 60 years of experience is that as we get in touch with Channel 3, it's our birthright. It's who we truly are. The Channel 5 mentality that we were all programmed into is the false ego. It's not who you are. So that's what changes our life as we get in touch with what I call our essence, your true self. And life becomes more healthy, more joyful. Channel 5 is based in fear. We make a lot of decisions out of fear, which is not good. Channel 3 is about joy. So as you learn to release restrictions, you have the possibility now of making choice. And then it's your choice. Nobody's going to take anything away from you. When you're in Channel 3, it doesn't take anything away. It just makes whatever you do even better and opens up to the new possibilities of your life. So,
That's it. That's so beautiful. I mean, think I've learned in my life that the opposite of love is not hate, it's fear. Because if you act in a state of love,
yeah,
things flow. When you act in a state of fear, it gets messy.
right. I run into a lot of wealthy people. They have all the toys, houses, cars, jewelry, boats, whatever. And as I treat them, there's this overwhelming sense of sadness I feel pouring out of them.
Mm,
And so that it's nothing wrong with having toys, but if you're not enjoying your toys, if you're not enjoying your life, what's the purpose?
right.
We were given the message somehow, all of us, that we're here to suffer. And most people have gotten very good at it. We're not here to suffer. We're here to enjoy our life and teach other people how to do the same. And that's truly living, you know.
That's beautiful, John. Well, honestly, this has just been so great. And I'm so honored to have had the time to chat with you and to make your acquaintance physically here. You know, like I say, I feel very akin to the energy that you've always put forth and just really appreciate everything that you put out there into the world. I know many of my friends who have taken many of your courses are, you know, wonderful at what they do. They're very skilled. So, you know, your education courses are doing great work for a lot of people. I've seen it happen for myself. So if people want to find out more about the John Barnes method of myofascial release to learn from you, how can people find you and take one of your courses?
Call 1-800-FASCIAL. Our website is myofascialrelease.com. And, you know,
And do you still teach?
am I what?
Do you still, you yourself actually
I
teach your
do.
courses? You
I,
do.
yeah.
I'm
I
going
love,
to come take you. And I've like this is my year of going back and taking other people's courses again and trying to go back and do it. At 2020, I used to take at least 4 different something or other, whether it was a biology course or it was a course in whatever. And then when COVID happened, it was like the whole world stopped. And I'm like jonesing to get back in the classroom and learn from other educators. And I don't know, we're not getting any younger, so I feel like harness it all while everybody's still around, right?
that's for sure.
Indeed, indeed. Well, John, thank you so much for being on Anatomical Gangster. And for those of you guys listening, hey, I hope that you subscribe to the channel, follow it, share this with your friends. And if you're curious about myofascial release, certainly go and check out John's website, and I'll make sure to leave it in the show notes. And as always, be healthy, be happy, and be well. We'll see you on the next Anatomical Gangster podcast.